You know that feeling when your whole life suddenly goes off the rails? Well, buckle up, because I'm about to tell you how my world came crashing down around me, all thanks to one disastrous dinner party. It was a Friday night, and I was dreading the evening ahead. My wife, Sarah, had insisted we host her boss and his wife for dinner. Now, I'm not usually one for smoozing with the higher-ups, but Sarah had been gunning for a promotion at her law firm for months. She'd been putting in crazy hours, kissing us left and right, and generally driving herself, and me, insane with stress. "Jack, please," she begged earlier that day. "This is important. Mr. Holloway could make or break my career. Just try to be charming, okay?" I bristled at that. What's that supposed to mean? I can be plenty charming. Sarah had given me one of her patented looks, the kind that made me feel about 2 inches tall. You know what I mean? No stupid jokes. No talking about your conspiracy theories. And for the love of God, don't bring up politics. So there I was standing in our kitchen in my nicest button-down shirt, chopping vegetables like my life depended on it. Sarah flitted around me, a whirlwind of nervous energy in her sleek black dress. "Jack, did you remember to chill the white wine?" She called over her shoulder as she straightened a painting in the living room for the millionth time. I rolled my eyes. "Yes, dear. It's been chilling since this morning, just like you asked. And you picked up the fancy cheese I wanted. Got it yesterday. What about?" I set down my knife with a little more force than necessary. "Sarah, honey, love of my life, I've got everything under control. Why don't you take a deep breath and relax for a minute?" She came back into the kitchen, wringing her hands. "I'm sorry, this is such a big deal. Mr. Holloway never socializes with junior associates. If I can impress him tonight." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and pulled her into a hug. "Hey, you've got this. You're brilliant, you work harder than anyone I know, and you make a mean risotto. What's not to love?" Sarah gave me a small smile and leaned into my embrace. For a moment, I felt that familiar warmth, the connection that had drawn us together in the first place. Then the doorbell rang, and just like that, Sarah was all business again. "They're here," she hissed, smoothing down her dress. "How do I look?" "Gorgeous," I assured her, and she was, all long legs and sharp angles, with her dark hair swept up in some complicated twist. Sometimes I still couldn't believe this ambitious, driven woman had agreed to marry a schnock like me. Sarah took a deep breath, plastered on her most winning smile, and went to answer the door. I heard the murmur of voices in the entryway, and then Sarah was ushering our guests into the living room. "Jack," she called, "come meet Mr. and Mrs. Holloway." I wiped my sweaty palms on my slacks and headed out to face the music. Sarah was already pouring drinks, chattering away about the lovely weather we'd been having. And there, settled on our couch like he owned the place, was the infamous Mr. Holloway. Look, I try not to judge people based on first impressions. But the moment I laid eyes on Richard Holloway, I knew we weren't going to get along. He was one of those guys who screamed Dutch about from a mile away, all slicked back hair and expensive suits, with a smirk that said he knew exactly how much power he wielded. "Ah, so this is the elusive husband." Holloway boomed as I entered the room. He didn't bother to stand, just looked me up and down like I was a piece of meat at the market. "Sarah's told us so much about you, Jack. Although I must say I pictured you taller." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the way Sarah's eyes had gone wide with panic. "Well, good things come in small packages, right?" Holloway's wife, a blonde Botox disaster in a dress that cost more than my monthly salary, let out a titter of laughter. "Oh, he's funny, Sarah. You didn't tell us he was funny." I glanced at Sarah, expecting her to jump in with some witty reply. Instead, she just gave a tight little smile and thrust a glass of wine into my hand. "Jack works in it," she said quickly. "He's very modest about his accomplishments." Holloway raised an eyebrow. "Ate, so you're good with computers and such?" I shrugged. "I get by. Mostly, I'm just trying to keep up with all the latest tech Sarah's firm uses. It's a constant battle to stay ahead of the curve. Oh, unsure, Holloway said, in a tone that suggested he thought I was about as technologically savvy as a caveman. Tell me, Jack, what do you think about the rise of artificial intelligence in the legal field? Sarah and I were just discussing it the other day. I've opened my mouth to answer, but Sarah cut me off. Oh, honey, you don't need to worry about that. It's all very technical and boring. Why didn't you tell the Holloways about that fun project you've been working on? The one with the thing. I blinked at her, confused. What the hell was she talking about? What project? Sarah let out a high-pitched laugh that sounded nothing like her. You know, silly, the one you were telling me about last week. With the computers and the coding. I stared at her, feeling like I'd stepped into some bizarre parallel universe where my wife had been replaced by a malfunctioning robot. Sarah, I have no idea what you're talking about. Holloway chuckled, a low, condescending sound that set my teeth on edge. Ah, the mysteries of the male mind. My Cynthia's always forgetting what I tell her too. Must be all that law jargon cluttering up their pretty little heads, eh? I felt a spark of anger ignite in my chest. Who the hell did this guy think he was? But before I could say anything, Sarah jumped in again. Oh, Mr. Holloway, you're terrible. She giggled, actually giggled, like some airheaded schoolgirl. Jack's just being modest. He's always working on something clever, aren't you, dear? Even if you can't always explain it to little old me. And that's when it hit me. Sarah wasn't malfunctioning. She wasn't confused. She was playing dumb. Playing me as the simpleton husband who couldn't keep up with her big important law career. And she was doing it all to impress this smug bastard on our couch. I took a long swig of my wine, trying to tamp down the growing fury in my gut. You know what? I said, plastering on a smile. You got me. I've been working on this super top secret project. It's so classified, I can't even remember the details myself half the time. Holloway's wife clapped her hands in delight. Oh, how exciting. Is it for the government? Are you a spy? I winked at her. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. Sarah let out another of those forced laughs. Oh, Jack, you're such a kidder. He loves his little jokes, don't you, sweetie? Always keeping me on my toes. I gritted my teeth. Yeah, that's me. Regular comedian. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of thinly veiled insults and awkward silences. Sarah prattled on about cases she was working on, while Holloway interjected with helpful suggestions and not so subtle reminders of his own brilliance. I mostly sat there stewing, wondering how the hell I'd ended up in this nightmare. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, Sarah would jump in to translate for me, as if I was speaking in tongues instead of perfectly comprehensible English. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I could see my marriage crumbling before my eyes, and I was powerless to stop it. By the time we sat down to dinner, I was ready to explode. Sarah had outdone herself with the meal, some fancy French dish I couldn't pronounce, paired with wine that probably cost more than my first car. But I could barely taste any of it. All I could focus on was the way Sarah kept simpering at Holloway, hanging on his every word like he was some kind of god. So, Jack, Holloway said, fixing me with that irritating smirk. Sarah tells me you're quite the handyman around the house. Built that deck out back yourself, did you? I nodded stiffly. That's right. Took a few weekends, but I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. Oh, it's just darling, Holloway's wife cooed. So rustic and charming. It must be so nice to have a husband who's good with his hands, Sarah. Sarah smiled indulgently. Oh yes, Jack's very handy. Always tinkering with something or other. Although sometimes I think he bit off more than he could chew with that deck project. Remember how long it took you to figure out how to use that power saw, honey? I stared at her, dumbfounded. What the hell was she talking about? I'd been using power tools since I was a teenager. I don't recall having any trouble with the saw, I said slowly. Sarah waved a hand dismissively. Oh, you know how you get with new gadgets. Always need a little help figuring things out. But that's okay. It's endearing, really. Holloway chuckled. I guess I remember when I tried my hand as a little home improvement. Cynthia came home to find me tangled up in Christmas lights, trying to hang them in July. Decided then and there to leave that sort of thing to the professionals. No shame in knowing your limitations, Ed Jack. I felt something inside me snap. You know what? I don't have any limitations when it comes to building things. That deck, I designed it from scratch, got all the proper permits, and built it to code. It passed inspection with flying colors. And as for power tools, I've been using them since before Sarah here even knew what a law firm was. A heavy silence fell over the table. Sarah's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with horror. Holloway looked like he'd just bitten into something sour. Jack, Sarah hissed. What are you doing? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. What am I doing? I'm telling the truth, Sarah. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. Holloway cleared his throat. Now, let's not get worked up. I'm sure Sarah didn't mean any offense. I rounded on him. Oh, I'm sure she didn't. Just like you didn't mean any offense with your condescending bullshit all night. Tell me, does it make you feel big to talk down to people? To treat them like they're stupid just because they don't wear $1,000 suits or kiss your ass for a living? Jack, Sarah shrieked. Apologize right now. But I was on a roll. Years of pent-up frustration came pouring out of me like a burst dam. No, I will not apologize. I'm done playing nice. I'm done pretending to be some bumbling idiot just so you can feel superior. And I'm especially done watching my wife throw me under the bus to impress a pompous jerk like you. Holloway's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. Now see here. I held up a hand. No, you see here. I may not be a fancy lawyer, but I'm damn good at what I do. I work hard. I take care of my family. And I don't need to put other people down to feel good about myself. And if that's not good enough for you, or for my wife apparently, then you can both go to hell. With that, I stormed out of the dining room, leaving a tableau of shocked faces behind me. I grabbed my keys and wallet from the hall table and headed for the front door. Sarah came running after me. Jack, wait. Where are you going? I turned to face her, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with. Scared, vulnerable human. But it was too late. The damage had been done. I'm leaving, I said quietly. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you and see the stranger you've become. But the Holloways, she stammered. I laughed bitterly. Of course, that's what you're worried about. Well, don't let me keep you from your important guests. I'm sure you'll find some way to spin this into another charming anecdote about your idiot husband. I wrenched open the door and stepped out into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear Sarah calling my name, her voice cracking with desperation, but I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove, with no real destination in mind. I just knew I had to get away. I ended up at a dive bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody asks questions and the bartender keeps your glass full. I must have looked like hell, because the grizzled old guy behind the bar took one look at me and poured me a double without even asking. Rough night? He grunted as I tossed back the whiskey. I let out a harsh laugh. You could say that. Just found out my whole marriage is a lie. He nodded sagely, like he heard this kind of thing every day. Maybe he did. Women, he said, shaking his head. Can't live with them, can't shoot him. Want another? I pushed my glass towards him. Keep 'em coming. And so began the longest night of my life. I drank until the edges of the world got fuzzy, until the ache in my chest dulled to a manageable throb. I poured out my story to anyone who would listen. The bartender, the guy shooting pool in the corner, even the bathroom attendant, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. You know what the worst part is? I slurred to a woman who'd made the mistake of sitting next to me at the bar. I really thought we had something special. I thought we were a team. The woman patted my arm sympathetically. Men, she sighed, always thinking with their hearts instead of their heads. I blinked at her, trying to focus on her face. Isn't that supposed to be the other way around? She shrugged. Honey, in my experience, men are the real romantics. You'll just hide it better. As the night wore on, my anger began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep sadness. How had things gone so wrong? When had Sarah and I stopped being partners and started being adversaries? I thought back over our relationship, searching for clues I might have missed. We'd met in college. Me, the scruffy computer science major, and her, the ambitious pre-law student. It had been an unlikely match, but we clicked instantly. Sarah had been drawn to my laid-back nature, my ability to make her laugh even during finals week. And I'd been in awe of her drive, her passion for justice, her razor-sharp mind. For years, we'd been happy. We'd supported each other through grad school and entry-level jobs, celebrated each other's successes, and commiserated over setbacks. When had that changed? When had Sarah started seeing me as a liability instead of an asset? I thought about all the little comments over the years, the jokes at my expense that I'd laughed off. The way she'd started introducing me as my husband Jack instead of Jack my husband, a subtle shift that spoke volumes. The invitations to work events that had slowly dried up, Sarah's excuses becoming flimsier each time. She was embarrassed by me. I realized, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. She's been embarrassed by me for years. The bartender, who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop all night, shook his head. Sounds like you're better off without her, buddy. I stared into my empty glass, watching the light refract through the crystalline patterns. Maybe, I said softly, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. As the bar began to empty out, I knew I couldn't avoid reality forever. I called a cab and gave the driver my address, praying that Sarah would be asleep by the time I got home. I wasn't ready to face her, wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to face her. The cab pulled up to our house, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. The lights were still on. Sarah was awake. I paid the driver and stumbled up the walkway, fumbling with my keys. Before I could get the door open, it swung inward, revealing Sarah's tear-stained face. "Jack," she breathed, relief and anger warring in her voice. "Where have you been?" "I've been calling you for hours." I brushed past her, the smell of whiskey clinging to my clothes. Apt, I grunted. Needed to clear my head. Sarah followed me into the living room, wringing her hands. "Jack, we need to talk about what happened." Mr. Holloway was very upset. I whirled on her, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Of course, that's what you're worried about. Your precious Mr. Holloway's feelings. God forbid we upset the almighty boss man." Sarah's eyes flashed. "This isn't just about him, Jack. This is about my career. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to get where I am? And you just threw it all away in one night." The injustice of her words hit me like a physical blow. I threw it away. Me? You're the one who spent the entire evening making me look like an idiot. You're the one who apparently thinks so little of me that you have to lie to make yourself look better. Sarah's face crumpled. "That's not. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what, Sarah? Didn't mean to belittle me. Didn't mean to treat me like I'm some kind of embarrassment." I could feel years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like that's exactly what you meant to do." Sarah sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I wanted so badly to impress them. You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. I need this promotion, Jack. I need to prove myself." I stared at her, really looking at the woman I'd married for the first time in years. She looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the confident lawyer I was used to seeing. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the hurt was still too raw. "And what about me, Sarah?" I asked quietly. "Where do I fit into this grand plan of yours? Am I just some prop you can use to make yourself look better? Some bumbling sidekick to your brilliant legal mind?" Sarah looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "No, of course not. You're my husband. I love you." The words rang hollow. "Do you? Because tonight it felt a lot like you were ashamed of me." Sarah flinched. "I'm not. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. It's just, Sometimes I worry that we're growing apart, that we don't have anything in common anymore. The truth of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. We had been growing apart, hadn't we? Slowly but surely, day by day, we'd been drifting in different directions. I'd been so caught up in my own world, my own projects, that I hadn't even noticed. So your solution was to lie? I asked, the anger draining out of me, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. To pretend I'm some kind of idiot who can't even use a power saw. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know why I said those things. I was nervous, and Mr. Holloway can be so intimidating. I panicked. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging heavy between us. Finally, I spoke. I think I need some time, I said softly, to figure out where we go from here, if we go anywhere from here. Sarah's head snapped up, fear etched across her features. What are you saying? I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my years. I'm saying that I can't just pretend tonight didn't happen. That we can't just go back to normal. Not when normal apparently means you're ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of you, Sarah protested weakly. Aren't you? I countered. Because it sure felt that way tonight. And the more I think about it, the more I realize it's felt that way for a long time. I stood up, swaying slightly as the alcohol in my system made itself known. I'm going to stay at Mike's for a few days. I need some space to think. Sarah jumped up, panic in her eyes. Jack, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling or I'll quit my job. Whatever it takes. I shook my head. It's not about the job, Sarah. It's about us. About who we've become. I don't even recognize us anymore. With a heavy heart, I went upstairs to pack a bag. As I threw clothes haphazardly into a duffel, I could hear Sarah's muffled sobs from downstairs. Part of me wanted to go to her, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But I knew that would be a lie. Nothing was okay. I wasn't sure it ever would be again. I spent the next week at my best friend Mike's place, sleeping on his lumpy couch and trying to make sense of the wreckage of my marriage. Mike, bless him, didn't push me to talk. He just kept the beer flowing and put on mindless action movies, a silent but steady presence. Sarah called and texted constantly, her messages growing increasingly desperate. I read them all, my heart breaking a little more each time, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed time to sort through the tangled mess of emotions in my head. It was on day 5 of my self-imposed exile that Mike finally broached the subject. So he said, tossing me a beer as we settled in for another night of numbing our brains with explosions and car chases. You gonna tell me what's really going on, or do I have to beat it out of you? I sighed, popping the tab on my beer. It's complicated. Mike snorted. No shit, Sherlock. You show up at my door in the middle of the night, looking like someone ran over your dog, and you've been moping around here for days. Spill. And so I did. I told him everything. The disastrous dinner party, Sarah's lies, the years of growing resentment I hadn't even realized was there. Mike listened silently, his face growing darker with each word. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. Shit, man. That's rough. I laughed humorlessly. Yeah, you could say that. Mike took a long pull of his beer, his brow furrowed in thought. So what are you going to do? I shrugged helplessly. I don't know. I love her, Mike. Or at least I love who she used to be. But I don't know if I can get past this. I don't know if I can trust her again. Mike nodded slowly. Look, I'm not exactly Dr. Phil here. It seems to me like you've got two choices. You can try to work it out, go to counseling, all that jazz. Or, I prompted. He met my eyes, his expression serious. Or you can cut your losses. Start fresh. It'll hurt like hell, but maybe it's better than dragging out something that's already dead. His words hit me like a freight train. Was that what my marriage was? Something already dead, just waiting for someone to pull the plug? The thought made me feel sick. I don't know if I'm ready to give up, I said softly. Mike clapped me on the shoulder. Then don't. Fight for it, man. But make sure you're fighting for the right reasons, not just because you're afraid of being alone. His words stuck with me over the next few days. I found myself analyzing every moment of my relationship with Sarah, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. Had it been a slow decline, or had there been a specific moment when everything changed? I thought about the early days of our marriage, how we'd stayed up late talking about our dreams, our plans for the future. I'd wanted to start my own tech company someday. Sarah had talked about becoming a judge, about making a real difference in the world. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had gotten lost in the daily grind of life. I'd settled into a comfortable but unfulfilling job at a big tech firm. Sarah had thrown herself into the cutthroat world of corporate law, her idealism slowly eroded by the realities of billable hours and office politics. Had we grown apart, or had we just stopped growing together? One day, at the end of my exile, I finally worked up the courage to call Sarah. My heart was pounding as the phone rang, and I almost hung up twice before she answered. "Jack." Her voice was small, hesitant. "Is that really you?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah, it's me. I think we need to talk." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a small park near our house where we used to have picnics when we first moved to the neighborhood. As I waited on a bench, watching families play frisbee and couples stroll hand in hand, I felt a pang of nostalgia so strong it almost took my breath away. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, looking as nervous as I felt. She'd lost weight in the short time we'd been apart, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. It hurt to see her like this, but a small, petty part of me was glad she was suffering too. "Hi," she said softly, hovering uncertainly near the bench. I gestured for her to sit. "Hi." We sat in awkward silence for a moment, neither of us quite sure where to begin. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I'm so sorry, Jack," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I know I hurt you, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I never meant to make you feel less than. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I've been taking you for granted for far too long." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. Sarah continued, the words tumbling out of her in a rush. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. About us, about my job, about the kind of person I've become. And I don't like what I see, Jack. I don't like who I am when I'm at work. I don't like the way I've been treating you. I want to change. I want us to be a team again." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet her eyes. "I want that too, Sarah. But I don't know if it's possible. We've both changed so much. I don't know if we even know who we are anymore, let alone who we are as a couple." Sarah reached for my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I let her take it. "Then let's figure it out together," she pleaded. "Let's rediscover who we are, who we'd want to be. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes. We can start over, go traveling, do all the things we always talked about but never did." For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Sarah and I backpacking through Europe, starting a business together, building a life that was truly ours. It was a beautiful dream. But was it just that, a dream? "I don't know if it's that simple," I said gently. "The problem isn't just your job, or my job, or any one thing. It's us. We've been growing in different directions for years, and I'm not sure we can find our way back to each other." Sarah's face crumpled, and I felt my heart break all over again. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're just giving up on us." I shook my head. "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. We can't just pretend the last few years didn't happen. We can't erase all the little hurts, all the times we chose our careers over each other. It's going to take more than a grand gesture to fix this." "Then what do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice small and scared. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. I think we need to separate. Officially. Give ourselves some real time and space to figure out who we are and what we want. Sarah recoiled like I'd slapped her. "Separate? Jack, no. Please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, take a vacation, anything. Just please don't leave me." The desperation in her voice nearly broke my resolve. But I knew, deep in my gut, that this was the right decision. I'm not leaving you, Sarah. I'm giving us both a chance to find ourselves again. If we're meant to be together, we'll find our way back. But we can't do that if we're clinging to something that isn't working anymore. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, and I had to fight the urge to wipe them away. How long? She choked out. I don't know, I answered honestly. As long as it takes. Maybe a few months. Maybe longer. Sarah nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. And then what? We just see where we are. I squeeze her hand gently. Yeah, we see where we are. No pressure, no expectations, just us. We sat there for a long time, watching the sun set over the park. There was so much left unsaid between us, so many hearts still raw and bleeding. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were being truly honest with each other. As we finally stood to leave, Sarah pulled me into a fierce hug. I love you, she whispered. I know I haven't shown it very well lately, but I do. I always will. I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I love you too, I murmured. That's why we had to do this. We had to give ourselves a chance to remember why we fell in love in the first place. We parted ways that night, both of us raw and emotionally drained. I went back to Mike's, and Sarah returned to our empty house. It felt like the end of something, but also maybe the beginning of something new. The next few months were some of the hardest of my life. Sarah and I kept our distance, communicating only through brief texts and the occasional phone call to sort out practical matters. I threw myself into work, taking on challenging projects that I'd been putting off for years. Sarah, true to her word, quit her job at the law firm and started volunteering at a local legal aid clinic. We both started therapy, individually at first, and later as a couple. It was painful, dredging up years of buried resentments and unspoken fears. But slowly, painfully, we started to reconnect. Not as husband and wife, but as Jack and Sarah, two people trying to find their way back to each other. There were setbacks, of course. Moments of doubt when I wondered if we were just prolonging the inevitable. Times when the hurt and anger threatened to overwhelm the fragile new understanding we were building. But there were good moments too. A chance encounter at our favorite coffee shop that turned into hours of conversation, reminding me of why I'd fallen in love with Sarah in the first place. A text message out of the blue, Sarah sharing a silly joke that made me laugh for the first time in weeks. It was during one of our therapy sessions, about 6 months into our separation, that I had a revelation. We were discussing our goals, both individually and as a couple, when Sarah said something that stopped me in my tracks. I want to be proud of who I am, she said softly. Not because of my job title or how much money I make, but because I'm living the life that matters. And I want to be with someone who's proud of me for the same reasons. In that moment, I saw Sarah, really saw her, for the first time in years. Not as the ambitious lawyer or the wife who had hurt me, but as the passionate, caring woman I'd fallen in love with. And I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd lost sight of who I was too. I want that too, I said, my voice thick with emotion, for both of us. It wasn't an instant fix. We still had a lot of work to do, a lot of trust to rebuild, but it felt like a turning point. Like maybe, just maybe, we had a shot at making this work. Over the next few months, Sarah and I started dating again. Awkward, fumbling attempts at reconnecting that sometimes felt more like high school than a marriage on the mend. We took cooking classes together, went hiking on weekends, stayed up late talking about our hopes and fears like we used to in college. Slowly, tentatively, we started to rebuild our life together. But this time, we were careful to maintain our individual identities too. Sarah started a small non-profit, providing legal services to low-income families. I finally worked up the courage to start my own tech consultancy, something I'd been dreaming about for years. It wasn't always easy. There were fights and misunderstandings, moments when old wounds reopened, and we wondered if we were making a mistake. But there were beautiful moments too, quiet evenings spent reading side by side, lazy Sunday mornings where we rediscovered the simple joy of just being together. 1 year to the day after that disastrous dinner party, Sarah and I found ourselves back in that same park where we'd agreed to separate. The air was crisp with the promise of fall, leaves crunching under our feet as we walked hand in hand. "Do you ever wonder?" Sarah asked softly. "What would have happened if we hadn't taken this break? If we just tried to push through?" I considered her question carefully. Honestly, I think we would have destroyed each other. We were both so lost, so caught up in our own pain and resentment. We needed this time apart to remember who we are, both as individuals and as a couple. Sarah nodded, squeezing my hand. "I think you're right. As hard as it's been, I wouldn't trade this year for anything. I feel like I found myself again, and I've fallen in love with you all over again in the process." My heart swelled at her words. I feel the same way, I admit it. It's like we had to break apart to come back together stronger. We stopped walking, turning to face each other. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but she was smiling, that real, radiant smile that had first captured my heart all those years ago. "So where do we go from here?" she asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. I took a deep breath, suddenly nervous despite everything we'd been through. "Well," I said, reaching into my pocket, "I was thinking we could start with this." I pulled out a small velvet box, and Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Inside was a simple gold band, not an engagement ring, but a promise. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "this past year has been the hardest and most rewarding of my life. We've been through hell and back, and I think we're stronger for it. I love you, not just the idea of you or the memory of who we used to be, but who you are right now, in this moment. And I want to spend the rest of my life getting to know every version of you that's yet to come." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she was beaming. I continued, my own eyes misty. "This isn't an engagement ring. We're already married, even if we lost sight of what that meant for a while. This is a promise to keep choosing each other every day, to never take each other for granted again, to grow together instead of apart. Will you accept it?" Sarah nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. I slipped the ring onto her finger, right next to her wedding band. It fit perfectly, like it had always been meant to be there. "I have something for you too," Sarah said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a matching ring. I had the same idea. She laughed through her tears. Great minds think alike, I guess. As she slid the ring onto my finger, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This wasn't an ending or a new beginning. It was a continuation, a recommitment to the journey we started all those years ago. We sealed our promise with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of hope for the future. As we walked out of the park, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. In the months that followed, Sarah and I worked hard to keep the promises we'd made that day in the park. We made a conscious effort to communicate better, to support each other's dreams, and to never lose sight of what really mattered. Sarah's nonprofit flourished, and she found a sense of purpose in her work that had been missing for years. I threw myself into growing my consultancy, taking on challenging projects that pushed me out of my comfort zone. We cheered each other's successes and comforted each other through the inevitable setbacks. We also made time for the little things, impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, surprise lunch dates in the middle of a busy workday, lazy weekends spent exploring our own city like tourists. We rediscovered the joy of simply being together, of sharing our lives in all the small, everyday moments. It wasn't always perfect. We still had arguments, still got on each other's nerves sometimes. But now, instead of letting those moments drive us apart, we use them as opportunities to grow closer. We learned to fight fair, to listen without judgment, and to always make up before going to bed. As our second anniversary approached, both of our wedding and of that fateful dinner party, Sarah and I decided it was time to face one last demon from our past. We invited the Holloways over for dinner. This time, there was no frantic preparation, no desperate attempts to impress. We cooked a simple meal together, laughing and stealing kisses as we worked side by side in the kitchen. When the doorbell rang, we answered it together, a united front. Mr. Holloway looked uncomfortable as he stepped into our home, his wife hovering nervously behind him. "Jack, Sarah," he said stiffly. "Thank you for having us." I could feel Sarah tense beside me, but her voice was warm and steady as she welcomed them in. "We're glad you could make it. Please come in." As we settled in the living room with drinks, an awkward silence fell over the group. Finally, Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. "I feel I owe you both an apology," he said, surprising us all. "My behavior at our last encounter was inexcusable. I've done a lot of soul searching since then, and I realize now how my actions must have affected you both." Sarah and I exchanged a glance, equally shocked by this turn of events. "Thank you, Richard," Sarah said softly. "That means a lot." I nodded, feeling a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. "We appreciate that," I added. "And I think we all played a part in how that night went down. Sarah and I have done our own soul searching this past year." Mrs. Holloway spoke up then, her voice timid. "We heard about your separation. I hope we didn't cause any lasting damage to your relationship." Sarah reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. "Actually," she said, "in a way that night was the best thing that could have happened to us. It forced us to confront some hard truths about ourselves and our marriage. We're stronger now than we've ever been." I squeezed her hand, warmth spreading through my chest at her words. "It's been a tough road," I admitted, "but we're grateful for where it's led us." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of good food, honest conversation, and even a few laughs. By the time the Holloways left, the air felt clearer somehow, like we'd all been granted a fresh start. As we cleared the dishes later that night, Sarah bumped her hip against mine playfully. "Well," she said, "that went better than I expected." I chuckled, pulling her into a hug. "Yeah, who would have thought? Maybe miracles do happen." Sarah leaned back to look at me, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You know what this means, don't you? We're going to have to find a new origin story for our great romantic reunion. Can't very well tell the grandkids it all started because my boss was a jerk at dinner." I laughed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I don't know," I teased. "I think it's kind of perfect. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy and girl remember why they fell in love in the first place, and kick ass at marriage 2.0. Sarah grinned, rising up on her tiptoes to kiss me properly. "I like the sound of that," she murmured against my lips. As we finished cleaning up and got ready for bed, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. A year ago, I'd been certain our marriage was over. Now, I couldn't imagine my life without Sarah by my side. We'd been through hell and back, faced our deepest fears and insecurities, and come out stronger on the other side. We'd remembered not just why we fell in love, but how to stay in love, how to nurture our relationship through all of life's ups and downs. As we curled up together that night, Sarah's head on my chest and my arms around her, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. We'd weathered the storm, and our love had not just survived, but thrived. Whatever challenges the future might hold, I knew we'd face them together. Not as the perfect couple we'd once pretended to be, but as two imperfect people who chose each other every single day. And really, isn't that what true love is all about?